After putting the POCO M3 through paces, I have one major concern and some minor ones. If you're planning to buy this phone, even when it's on sale, I think there are a few things you should know first before pulling the trigger. So POCO M3 is marketed as a budget phone that offers more than what you expect. Considering the specs you're getting out of this one, such as a unique design, a 48 megapixel camera, a 1080p display, up to 128GB internal storage, and a gigantic 6000 mAh battery, you are getting a lot of value out of your money. But this is a budget phone, and budget phones typically have to cut a few corners to make them profitable. Let me start first with the good things. Right off the bat, the best part of this phone, at least for me, is the build and design. By now, we're used to seeing phones with the same glossy panel and camera humps. But the POCO M3 goes out of its way and went with a leather-like texture that's easy to grip and never attracts fingerprints. Together with that is a large plastic but glossy visor that houses the camera module. Even if the entirety of the back panel is made of plastic, I really love the way this texture feels in the hand. And the fact that it doesn't need wiping, except for the visor, is something I really appreciate. This one is called Power Black. There's blue and yellow as well, although I thought yellow was the best one. By far, this black is really stealthy and minimal. One more thing that I need to point out is the overall heft of the device. Given that it's a budget phone with a large battery, you would think that it's heavy and thick, but it's actually the opposite. It feels sleek and manageable in the hand, unlike the Realme C15 that felt bulky and heavy. So for a 6000 mAh device, POCO M3 gets an A+ for its build. But for the rest, it's your standard phone. The volume rocker is on the right hand side along with a flushed feeling fingerprint scanner. The SIM tray is on the other side. You got your USB-C port and speaker on the bottom, and a headphone jack up top. There's an IR blaster here as well, along with two more holes for which I think is for the speaker in the earpiece. POCO M3 does have a dual speaker setup, but the loudness from the top speaker is barely noticeable. It's almost as if it's not there, frankly speaking. And one more thing, there's no LED light for notifications, so yeah, just so you know. Now since this phone is using a 48 megapixel camera, it's one of the few phones with a small hump. And for the sake of calling the M3 a triple camera phone, POCO omitted the ultra-wide lens for a pair of 2 megapixel lenses for macro and depth. It's unfortunate, but then again, it's a budget phone. The macro works just fine, it has fixed focus and barely gets decent shots. But for the 48 megapixel sensor, you can get really good photos. The photos may not look good when viewed from the POCO M3 screen, but when you blow it up on a large screen, you wouldn't think they're from a budget phone. There's night mode as well, but again, you can barely see the difference between a regular photo unless you zoom in. There's no drastic change in the overall quality of the photos, but the texture gets restored significantly. Video isn't as impressive as stills, unfortunately. The colors look weird, but at the very least, there are no jitters or stutters. The M3 is only capable of recording up to 1080p at 30, so when it comes to budget phones, Realme 5i is the only one that can go up to 4K. For the 8 megapixel selfie camera, you just need good lighting to get decent photos. Overall, the cameras are usable. It's definitely better than the Redmi 9, which is one of the competitions of the POCO M3. Much like the Redmi 9, POCO M3 is using a 1080p display that's advertised to easily reach 400 nits. It gets bright indoors, but outdoors you can barely see the screen. I think this phone is using the same panels as the Redmi 9, except that it comes with HD playback support for Netflix. However, there's a weird bug going on with the display. At random times, the display would flicker once to a lower brightness level. The brightness slider, however, didn't adjust, so you would need to wait for the screen to randomly flicker back to its original state. It probably can be solved via a software update, but POCO definitely needs to do a better job in doing so, as I received this unit with the October patch when it's obviously December already. But for the battery, I have no complaints here. It's by far the longest lasting phone I have ever used. To give you some context, I once used this phone heavily, including hours of gaming. And by the time I hit 5%, I'd already clocked in nearly 8 hours of screen time. That's practically on pace for 10 hours if all I did was to watch movies or scroll through social media. With the 18 watts fast charger, you still need to wait for a little over 3 hours to get from 0 to full. But I noticed that the charging brick can support up to 22.5 watts. Obviously, the POCO M3 can only go up to 18 watts, but if you have another Xiaomi phone that can take advantage of that, consider it as a bonus. And now that brings us to the performance. I'm still running on MIUI 12 based on Android 10, and after nearly 3 years, this is the first time I was met with tons of bloatware out of the box. To be fair, they can be uninstalled. But then again, you need to do so to more than a dozen pre-installed apps. Another thing I wish POCO would have done was to switch out the Snapdragon 662 for at least the Helio G80 chipset, because the performance on the M3 is just slow. That doesn't mean it's unusable, but if you're someone who came from the Redmi 9 at the very least, because that one has a G80 chipset, you'll definitely feel the time it takes for every action to happen. You will also notice at times that the home screen reloads regardless of any app you have in the foreground. But one thing that I didn't expect is the scroll travel. A light touch scroll can get you to the next few pages already, which something even the POCO X3 NFC with 120Hz couldn't accomplish. But then again, the overall performance of the POCO M3 is just slow for my taste, which makes for major concern if you do plan to keep this device for long-term use. Even with software updates, I don't think the performance can improve significantly, on top of the fact that phones tend to slow down as they age. So that's it for the POCO M3 review. If you want to see more videos like this, feel free to hit that subscribe button. Until the next one, stay safe.